Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the next M&L Advantage webinar. This webinar is brought to you by Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm Brad Power, the Director of Programs for Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador. Today we will be talking about place building and economic development in the current COVID pandemic. So I'm joined today by Dr. Catherine Laughlin. Thank you, Catherine, for joining us. We'll get to her in just one second. A couple of quick housekeeping items. The webinar will take approximately 1 hour this morning, 60 minutes, depending on our questions and whatnot. A Q&A session will be held toward the end of the presentation. You can submit your questions in the chat function within the Zoom app. You can also email me, bpower@municipalnl.ca, or you can text me at 709-763-4686, and I'll put all those options in the chat function there momentarily. Just a reminder that the Zoom app has many features to help you participate in today's webinar, so feel free to play around with the gallery view and the speaker view and so on. If you run into any difficulty or the Zoom app locks up, by all means just follow the registration information that you had previously received to bring yourself back into it. The video from today's session will be made available on demand for the next couple of days, and then we will upload that to our website for long-term archiving, so you can get access to it there. After the webinar, I kindly ask that you complete our webinar satisfaction survey. It will just take 2 minutes, but it's going to be very important to M&L moving forward in the post-COVID world. We want to make sure that our training and the opportunities we provide to you are relevant and suit your needs. So without any further delay, we'll get started. Again, I'd like to introduce Dr. Catherine Laughlin. And Catherine, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As many of you may know, I have been to your beautiful place on more than one occasion through the years, over the past 10 years or so. I guess I started maybe, almost close to 10 years now. Wow. So you probably know that your place is one of my favorite places. It was one of the first places as city doctor I started going regularly, and it's sort of stayed in my heart ever since. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Laughlin. I specialize in the art and science of how place creates community, but also how we feel about our place also creates economic development, and trying to link those two things together between how people feel about a place and not only how they develop economically, but also how they recover economically, and how important it is that place holds together even during economic downturns, because it is one of the building blocks for economic development success when you come out the other side. My background is in social work. I have a master's and PhD in social work, specializing in families and children and community practice. I have worked at foundations until I went out on my own. So I know a lot about how communities work. I've worked in them as a social worker, as a funder, and now today as city doctor. And I'll tell a little bit about, for those of you who don't know, the big survey thing that I did that really started to bring into focus why these place things matter. So today, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about ways you can creatively keep community together during this time, and why that's so important. Here in North Carolina, where I live in the States, we're closing in on about 500 deaths from the coronavirus just in my state. And we've passed 60,000 deaths in the country here. So people are feeling it for sure. And we are locked down pretty much. School's been canceled for the year. And so we're all becoming homeschool teachers, and wow, do we underpay teachers? I think we all know that now, don't we? So it's been a journey for me personally, as well as for my place. And I think one of the good things to take out of all of this is we will come out of this on the other side with people having an even greater appreciation for their place and the role that it serves in our lives. I think we take it for granted until it's taken away, like most things. So I wanted to share some ideas to keep people together, and then thinking about how do you leverage how we come out of this. And because of my background is in people and psychology and sort of what drives that, but also place, I can sort of weave those things together in an interesting hybrid to get you going in a way that gets you prepared for the economic development and things we're all going to need to do, not only now, but when we emerge. So for those of you who don't know sort of my claim to fame, I guess, it would be the Night Soul of the Community Project, which I ran for Knight Foundation, which is a national philanthropy here in the States from 2008 to 2010. And what we were looking for, and it was exploratory, we didn't know what we were looking for actually, but we were trying to answer one basic question. What makes people love where they live and why does it matter? So we were basically trying to understand, does place still matter? Does it serve a role in our lives that is significant? And if it does, what role does it really serve? And what does it do for us if people love where they live? Is it a touchy-feely concept or does it mean much more? And as you can see from this snapshot on the screen, we were really looking at this idea of resident attachment. Can you measure how people feel about a place? And as you can tell from there, we looked at more than just one metric, because what we find is attachment is multidimensional, right? So those are the things that people need to kind of feel about their place to feel like they have an emotional attachment to it. So just briefly, outlook is how optimistic are you about your place's future? Would you recommend it to others? Do you find it to be the perfect place for you? Are you satisfied living there? And do you have a pride in that place? And once we were able to measure people's feelings on those areas, we then wanted to look at their opinions of certain aspects of the place to see, are there certain aspects of the place that really seem to drive those feelings? And lo and behold, it was very clear that everywhere we studied, 26 cities, over 3 years, 43,000 people, the same things mattered the most to driving those feelings about a place. And they were the opportunities for social interaction, the aesthetics of the place, and the general openness or welcoming of the place matched the residents' particular need. And where you had people loving those three things about the place, you always saw a higher level in attachment, as we defined it in the heart. And where you had higher levels of attachment, you also saw very strong trends in economic growth. Local GDP growth is what we measured specifically. But as the years moved on, because now we're 2020, we've discovered that it matters for a lot more than just GDP growth. It seems to have some protective factors in helping communities recover quickly, more quickly, I should say, from issues, but also serves things like, you know, you see lower school dropout rates, you see higher public health seeking behaviors, the elderly report feeling less isolated, lots of good things. So it is really an interesting concept to understand the power, really, of attachment. But today, what I wanted us to particularly focus on, as this zooms in a little bit for us, is the left side of this equation. Because as we're going through what is an unprecedented situation for all of us, a lot of the things that drive feelings of attachment, we can't really enjoy or do right now. I know here restaurants are closed, bars are closed, parks are closed. You're supposed to be going to the grocery store and coming home, and that's about it. And it's interesting because here we are required to wear masks in stores, in grocery stores, really the only store, and the home store. Those are the two places we can really go. We're required to wear masks. And living in the South, I have to say, one of the things that I discovered is that how much I smile at strangers in the grocery store. And I had a distinctive thought as I was in the grocery store one day with my mask on that, oh, I don't need to, why bother smiling? Nobody can tell I'm smiling because I have my mask on. And I was like, then all of my own work and research started playing around in my head. And I'm like, wow, that says something about I've become a little less open. I've become a little less engaged. So really being cognizant of how little things start to change how we behave in the environment, which also will turn around and affect our attachment to ourselves and to each other and the place in general. So I've heard that a student actually in I think Michigan, has come up with a mask that she created mostly for hard of hearing who needed to read lips, that was clear. And you can still see the smile. So I thought, well, that's a great placemaking idea, because you don't want to lose that. So this is where we're going to study today. It's a really quick snapshot of why I do this work and find it so compelling, and wanted to share some ideas with you guys today, specifically on the left side of the equation. Then we're going to talk a little bit.
It's Brad here. Sorry to interrupt. Can you just share your screen? I think we can't see the screen that you're sharing.
Oh, well, that's not going to help anybody. Of course. Gracious. So let's go back very quickly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Is that it?
That's it. Perfect.
Okay. All right. So just here we are. We're still okay. So here we are looking at, and I'll let everyone briefly take a look at the things I was talking about. The left side of the screen. Let's do this so it's even better. Hopefully, there we go. So we're going to be talking a lot about the social offerings, the aesthetics, the openness, and the resident attachment ideas, the metrics from that. I'm so sorry the screen wasn't showing. So you can understand sort of how those feelings develop and what about them in a place drives those feelings. So that's being zoomed in for you right now. So let's quickly move on and talk about some of the ideas that are good at replacing these aspects of a place that we can't enjoy right now. I mean, social offerings, aesthetics, and openness is not an option for a lot of us to demonstrate in our community right now. So how do we go about replacing these really important, critical aspects of a place that matter for attachment, but also matter for the big picture, which is local GDP growth and other things, as I mentioned. Okay. So how do you do that? What are our goals when you're trying to keep a community together while you're apart physically? And when you think about the goals for that, the first thing, and this has a public health function, but also a community function, which is managing the isolation. That probably is the most damaging thing that we're seeing right now, is people feeling very isolated from their communities and from each other. So what are some creative replacements for social offerings? Which I have to tell you, in the Soul Project, was the #1 thing that most drove Loving Where You Live, was the opportunity for positive social interaction. In every city we studied, every year we did the study. So we cannot underestimate the power of social interaction in our community to really be that lifeblood that makes people love where they live and want to get out and contribute to the economy by going out and doing things and enjoying their place. We can't do that now. So we have to find creative ways to replace, as close as we can, something that's just very critical to human existence, which is the opportunity for social interaction. And then on top of that, how do you maintain those connections? So there's the deficit side of helping people not feel as isolated. And then there's that proactive side of how do you maintain those connections? So if you want to think about it as one is decreasing a deficit while another goal is really growing the positive, how do you bring them together in a way to maintain their attachment virtually? So I wanted to share a few ideas that I've seen in a lot of my communities and a lot in this country. Some of them might be there for you guys as well. But the first idea is this phenomenon we have going on in America called the portrait, where a photographer actually goes into the neighborhoods and from the street takes pictures of families to commemorate or to just give people something positive to get excited about and do and sit out on the front porch. And some of these things, I mean, if you Google it, you'll find some amazing portraits, but here's just a couple where you can see the best part, I guess, of us being together is us being together. and sharing this new normal with everyone. And, you know, sometimes it's not always rainbows and butterflies, but it is undoubtedly the way people are able to share their lives with others and remember this time. So here's a new baby coming into the world and has to be shared, you know, through the door, but still capturing that and not letting that moment pass is a really and then posting that, you know, is a really interesting way for people to see we are kind of all in this together and we are all still here living, you know, and enjoying life. This is probably a little more real world for most of us. Anyway, dad's on the computer clutching toilet paper. Mom is still halfway in her pajamas, it appears, and drinking wine, I would guess, around 9:30 or so in the morning. And the kids are just raring to go. So even the funnier ones, the reenacting of famous portraits, all this stuff is happening on the front porch. And it provides some little economic development for photographers, arts and cultural communities who want to sponsor this. And then the sharing of that is really where you start to bring back some of that cohesiveness that we've lost during this time. So portraits is a really, and all of these ideas I'm going to talk about today, because if you know me, you know I don't like $1 billion ideas. I want something that you can do, that's quick, it's easy to implement, doesn't cost a lot of money, and can have really a cool impact, if you will, on people's feelings of emotional attachment and basically reducing that isolation. Another thing that's been really popular here is teacher parades through the neighborhood, where teachers actually from the schools, because we are out of schools, there's online learning, but it's not the same. I mean, let's be honest. So teachers are coordinating themselves to ride through the neighborhoods of their districts and wave to the kids. So this again gets to that psychological aspect of reducing the isolation, but also presenting some hope and some, don't forget we're still here, you know. And for children in particular, it's really important that they still feel like there's a structure to their lives. That place has really been that cocoon that children are growing up in. And when that cocoon is disturbed, either through something like this or a natural disaster, what children most need to feel is that the security they count on is still in place, that parents and grandparents are nearby. There are still the people that are most important in their lives, which is teachers often, especially grade school kids. To see their teacher and to be able to wave to their teacher makes them feel like we're still together. It's weird, you know, things are changing, but it's not forever. And this has really made a big difference in the communities. The kids respond to it so well, and then the parents, the parents talk about what a relief it is to see their child feel relieved, almost, to be able to see their teachers in this way, in such a positive way. So coordinating those teacher parades are a pretty cool way to really hit a lot of important points around isolation. I mean, you know, who's this dude? Tony. My friend Tony. The other thing that can be incredibly powerful right now is sharing skills to your Facebook community on a Facebook Live. I know this might seem like, why does that? But it does. And let me tell you why. Because one of the things that Facebook Live Skillshare does is it presents you, whether you're the mayor or you're the neighbor, just, you know, ordinary person, showing them in a different view, in a different way. You feel like you've known them. There's an intimacy there. There's a vulnerability there for sure, where you're seeing someone that you're used to seeing in a different way, in a more vulnerable way, and sharing a skill. You know, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. There's a lot of acceptance right now for things to not go well, especially with online learning or Facebook Lives, or, you know, you're not sharing your screen on Zoom. We're a little more tolerant these days than maybe we would have been before. So if you have encouraging your community members to do pop-up Facebook skill shares, I've seen people do in my community, in my neighborhood, they're doing this a lot. And some of it is really interesting. Even learning how to knit by hand without needles, cooking, more unusual ones. And let me show you this. This came out of Michigan, and I'll let you read the caption there if you can. But he's teaching folks basically how to do logo design by focusing on family crests. And he says this is a really good way to celebrate your grandma and all the weird stuff your dad says about your family, you know, in a crest. So he pops up very regularly and does a class and how you can do that. And what I love about that, of course, is that it makes you dig into your place's history and your family's history and figuring out what would it look like if we did something like that. So again, it is a different way to engage and make us feel still connected. And even if we're feeling a little more vulnerable through that, that's all the better. Because then it really helps grow that cohesion that is important for places. And what's great about this also is anybody in your network obviously could join in something like that. But the idea is to really drill down geographically to your community to really help with that particular cohesion. So how do we get ready for the next? And how do we take advantage of maybe some ground we gained in reducing isolation and still maintaining that attachment to get ready for a reopening? So here I would focus more on inspiring hope for the future. So if you remember in my, and I'm sorry to do this, but I want to show you in my slide here, one of the things that matters for resident attachment is this idea of optimism, outlook, your outlook for your community's future. That matters a little bit more than those other things in the heart. These are not equally distributed across those things. So optimism about your place's future is really key to attaching people or maintaining attachment to place today. And in this time, you have to kind of, I don't want to say manufacture it, but champion it in such a way that people believe it and are looking forward to the next, you know, and that's particularly important right now. So let's go back to where I was. So inspiring hope for the future, improving that outlook for inspiring optimism for what's next, focusing on a shared identity. Okay, so that's something we kind of talked about in the last stage, but how do we maintain that pride in place, which is another aspect of attachment? How do we do that when we're apart? How do we leverage that for next? And how do we leverage their appreciation for the place that now that we've lost it, now we really miss it? And there's an unfreezing happening all across cities. I know in this country where people are, you know, finally getting the role that place does play in their lives, that it's not a collection of buildings and sidewalks and stuff. It is a place where they derive a lot of their personal well-being. It is the place where I've even heard people talk about places being like a family member that they've lost and feeling that kind of loss. So that's important to take advantage of, because there's this unfreezing now where people are a little more ready to come back into place with open arms. So we should try to figure out how can we leverage that opportunity that we now have as the silver lining with all of this. So one of the ways we can do that is represent community to people now. What are the things about our place that deserve spotlight that maybe didn't always get the spotlight, or people are particularly missing right now, and how to reconnect them in? So one of my favorite examples, because it also deals with vulnerability, is from the National Cowboy Museum, where and it wasn't by design, they just didn't have someone else to run their social media. They had to get the guy who runs security, and bless his heart, which in the South, you know, is not a compliment. So when I say it, bless his heart, it means he had no idea how Twitter worked. He had no idea but he was all in because he loves this museum, right? So he's saying, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm super excited. So this is like day one. You might have heard about this guy. It's amazing. Day two, he's already in a panic about about how he's going to fulfill this role. And as soon as these tweets came out, people just fell in love with this guy because of his vulnerability. And he's been put in this position, but he's just trying to pull it off and still showcase a part of his place that he really loves. So he asked for tips. He even says, please, and then said he was Googling that. He didn't know he was posting that. And what's hilarious to me is that he still says, please, to Google, like that would help. But again, you know, never underestimate the power of manners. So then he gets tips from around the world. They say he got tens of thousands of tips. And he says, gosh, I realize I've been doing the hashtags wrong. I need to use that # thing on my phone. I'm learning. And then he does hashtag John Wayne. So now in that community, I'm sorry, it cracks me up. They do hashtag, just like he does it now, even though it's not right, it's growing. So, and this one is he's still trying to, you know, show off his place and struggling a little bit with the technology. He says, what do you guys think? And he says, you know, my Seth in marketing told me that social media is good for engagement. Let's get engaged. And then he makes a joke because he's married. He doesn't really even understand the engagement joke. And while this is going on, it's just his Twitter feed, as you can look down and see, is exploding. And people cannot wait to go to the National Cowboy Museum and meet Tim and Tina, I think now for sure too. And then finally, this was more recently, you can see down there, and you can see how it even increased in likes there too. Somebody suggested I post a TikTok, so he posts a clock from the museum. And he's not trying to be funny, but he's actually quite hilarious. So how can you start to showcase your place, again, back to people, even locals, but beyond, to encourage people to discover your place and not worry, because there's this unfreezing now around being vulnerable, that it's not perfect. Your social media is not perfect. Your cooking stream is not perfect. All the better sometimes in this particular case, for sure. The other thing that we can do right now is understand that this is a really important moment in the life of cities around the world. Museums and cultural organizations in particular are really wanting to take advantage of almost time capsuling this in some way. There's a lot of time capsule projects, asks for submissions from local community members on what has this been like for you? Because it is now part of history in a very real way. And even though it's kind of scary and kind of sad what's going on and the lives I know we're losing around the world, it's also an opportunity to realize that you're living a part of your place's history right now. This is one of those moments, right? So how can you, again, take full advantage of the opportunity to bring people together and share their stories and share their tips and how they're getting through this. And even you see some suggestions here about different ways you can really remember this moment as a part of history that will change us, no doubt, and change our places as well. For those of you who know me, know that I have a production company that tells the stories of places on stage. And I have found it to be probably one of the most effective place building things you can do, is to tell the story of your place on a stage. And not only does it change attachment levels in a 2-hour period, which if you imagine that's about how long a play would run, an hour and a half, 2 hours. I have never seen anything that moves the attachment needle quicker than people seeing their story of their place come to life on stage. And then on top of that, in true City Doctor fashion, those shows sell out like hotcakes. I know in the ones that I've done, we certainly are seeing sellouts. and comparatively huge economic boons. So I would say in average in our cities that I've done these shows is a $30,000 to $90,000 revenue for place, for community, for arts and culture communities. So it's something I believed in enough that I started a production company to do it. I was involved in one of these shows myself, and it just completely changed the way I understood how people really do attach to place. So I'm starting with my own town. I live in Cary, North Carolina, to start telling the story of place and writing that story. I was supposed to write it myself. Of course, that's the way playwrights usually work, producers work. And COVID has sort of not allowed me to do interviews, to spend the time with places that I normally would. And so I've decided to crowdsource the writing of the show by bringing residents in to submit actual scenes that they would like to see as part of the show in their own monumental moments. And so now I have deployed my own community. Actually, I'll be deploying them more officially later in the week to do this. Research your place, come up with stories, find things in your attic, because this is something to be excited about. We're getting ready to have a big anniversary next year. Here's a positive way to spend your time being forward thinking about the future. So we wanted to do a community records day where we would encourage everybody in the community, sort of like Antiques Roadshow, but with place documents or place photographs, and have people come with their own personal things, it really is powerful in generational communities that I know many of you guys live in, where people have lived there a long time. You can really get some good stuff that aren't in the history books. So, but we can't do Records Day now. We can't do Antiques Roadshow for place right now this summer when I need to do it. So we're having to do some of this online. And sure enough, I will be taking these scenes and I will be making them, cohesive into a show that will happen next year. We'll probably do about 10 shows for the town of Cary. So again, this is ways to start priming the pump for economic development when we can come out of the other side, and making people not only miss their place and realize the role it plays for us, but also become part of what that next phase would look like. So that's just some basic ideas. I didn't want to go too deeply because I didn't know what, if any, questions you guys might have. Brad has been great about saying that he will keep us in contact. If you need to speak with me about something in particular, feel free. But I just wanted to show you some highlights of how you approach keeping people together and getting them excited about the future when economic development can really start again, and also realizing the role that place has always played in their lives, but they're just now truly realizing now. And with that, Brad, I will stop sharing my screen and open it up for any questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Catherine, very much. I really appreciate the great information you presented. It's funny, our M&L staff have a common group text that we talk to one another throughout the day, and one of the comments that just came in a few minutes ago, all positive, of course, but that their cheeks were hurting from laughing so hard. So great presentation. Folks, just a reminder that we have various opportunities for you to pose a question to Dr. Laughlin. You can utilize the chat function within the Zoom app. You can also email me at bpower@municipalnl.ca, or you can text me at 709-763-4686. There's also the raise hand function within Zoom as well. So we'll just give it a second to see if any questions come in.
Sure.
Just a reminder that, of course, the video from this webinar will be made available on demand for the next couple of days, and then we will post it on our website in the archive page. In addition, we'll make sure that Dr. Laughlin's presentation is connected to our website as well. And also another plug for our webinar satisfaction survey that you'll receive in your email after this call. So Dr. Laughlin, I don't see any questions coming in. So thank you very much for your time this morning. The presentation, very informative and helpful. It's nice to pick on a different topic today, other than just the COVID response from a municipal perspective. We really appreciate our partnership with you, Catherine. It's a long-standing one, and we're always happy to see our members jumping in there. Actually, we have a question from Craig Paulus, and Craig, I'm going to allow you to talk, so you go right ahead, sir.
Oh boy, keep it appropriate,
Okay.
Craig.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay. Can you see me, or is it just that ridiculous picture?
It's that
Just
ridiculous picture.
Okay. So I was in the middle of writing a question, but I'll just ask it directly. I'm really interested in what you think in terms of what communities, in particular smaller communities, rural communities, can do to start identifying some of those unique things about their place that you mentioned earlier, because you know that the research that you did on Night Soul of the Community is really good to give us a framework for where to go and what to look out for. But an individual community or a group of communities that are looking to try to mine the uniqueness of their place, what kind of things can they do locally to sort of identify what it is that makes them what they are?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think before COVID, I would say the most important thing to do is think about, for any place, but rural places in particular. I grew up, you know, a lot of the Laughlin family is farmers and grew up in rural North Carolina. So I understand this topic pretty well. But the first thing is, like, when someone comes to visit you, what do you show off about your place? And it doesn't have to be a restaurant. It doesn't have to be an offering per se, but where do you take them to give them the feeling of your place? And it could be a park, it could be a tree, it could be a farm, it could be a historic farm, it could be, you know, those places that hold your cultural identity. Where do you take them? And because the things that you show off about your place are the things that attach you to it as well. So that's always a real, even though it sounds unscientific, very scientific way to know what are the things that make us who we are. Where do we go? Where do we take people? And I think now during this time, again, it's a little more deficit based, but another way is to talk about, what do I most miss about my place? Is it a feeling? Is it a place? Is it a location? Is it the interaction? Because you have to understand that things that attach us to place are not just physical landmarks or opportunities to go somewhere. Openness is what we create as residents. Welcomeness is what we create as residents. We can't rely on our municipality or our leaders to provide that. That's on us. So it could be the things, and this is especially true in rural communities, that the thing that we most love and bonds us to our place is the feeling of community, is the feeling of togetherness and having that shared identity. So those would be the two questions. Before this, what would you show off? What would you do with them to give them a feeling of your place? And now it's like, what is the thing that we're hurting for, that we're missing? Thanks, Craig. I hope you're well.
Cool, thanks. You too.
Thanks, Craig. One other question came in. So this is just a bit of reiteration of what you said before, Catherine. So what is your recommendation for what we can encourage our members to do immediately? And is there a recommended first step in this context for them to take action to support their communities?
Mm-hmm. So I would say a couple of things right away that you can do that would be powerful. Number one, I think we still have to control and create this social isolation that a lot of people feel. So I do think having something that is a community time capsule, is having something where people share their experiences in a way to bring us all together, whether it's the skill sharing, all those ideas I talked about in the beginning. But the way to help local economies right now is the business model of a lot of our places has to move a little bit. So for now, in Cary, you can drive by and pick up beer curbside from the local brewery who makes beer. You can go to the mom and pop's place. I know in our, we have a lot of farm to table restaurants and they can't serve. So they're selling their supply, their groceries. and supporting those things right away. You know, the needs that we all have to fill, and food seems to be a big one that we're still allowed to do. Support your local community that way, by supporting those business models that are having to change a little bit. I mean, would you normally get a steak takeout? Probably not. But today is the time to give that a shot. Have you ever had a steak on styrofoam? Let's see how it is.
Excellent. Great answer. Great answer. So again, I think we've exhausted our questions. So again, Catherine, thank you very much. I will just add a note that one of our regional directors made there. He said he visited Bonavista a few years ago because of a military friend of his was visiting his family there. And he made friends with their family immediately. They invited him to stay, and with his guidance visited the surroundings the next day, which we could have potentially missed. So it's a great comment, DDA. Thanks for that. And again, folks, thanks everybody for joining here today. Before we part ways, just one last reminder, please complete our webinar satisfaction survey. It'll be extremely important to get your feedback. And we will have multiple other webinars offered through the M&L Advantage program over the next couple of days. Visit our website, municipalnl.ca, to see what's available and to register. Thank you again for joining us. Be safe, everyone. Wash your hands. And Catherine, you be safe as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. See you guys soon, I hope.
Take care now. See you.